Well, training camp is rolling on, and with that comes news and information that we are here to talk about on today's edition of the Audible. First up, Cooper Cup. He's fine. I,
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much all we need to say, Bloom, because you should be drafting Cooper Cup.
Yeah, I've got an article, if I have time, in the hopper, or an idea at least, of players that we're way too scared of in terms of injury discount. I get injury discount. I get skepticism when a player's on the back nine of their career, but that's a 25% discount or maybe a 50% discount. Cooper Cup is still a late first, early second round pick in terms of what his expected value would be. He's falling to the late third. That's a ridiculous discount. And onlookers are now saying, hey, he's Cooper Cup. People going like Charles Robinson at Rams camp. Yeah, Cooper Cup is Cooper Cup. So there's no reason to think that what we saw last year is a sign that he's in decline. Instead, it's a sign that he was hurt and he tried to play through it and it didn't go well. And even with that, he still had some fantasy value last year. So last year we were taking him in the top 5 or top 6. He belongs in probably the early second round, even with the injury and age skepticism. And the other thing I'll say while we're on the subject of the Rams is you can't read a Rams report or 2 or 3 without seeing Jordan Whittington mentioned. I just got to mention this because CC, we have drum beats. Sometimes the drum beats start early in camp and then fade. Sometimes the drum beat continues. And with the Rams, we think of Puka Nakua. Winnington's not going to be Puka Nakua. There's probably not going to be another Puka Nakua for a long time if there is another one. But Whittington is a player that they have big plans for, that they really like, that they're already starting to use occasionally with the first team. So when the Rams identify talent, we tend to trust them, just like when they took Cooper Cup in the third round.
Yes, just like when they took Puka Nakua and he emerged there, and both can be fantasy relevant. It's fine. People get all nervous. It's not one or the other, Bloom. And in
Right.
this case, it's both and maybe more.
Yeah, Nakua is going to be more downfield, big play. Cup is going to be more short and intermediate range. And I say all three because last year, now Cup could be more effective than he was last year. Demarcus Robinson should be a late round pick too. So I think Rams wide receivers, we like them. And with Matthew Stafford, now we'll see if he plays beyond this year. But for this year, Matthew Stafford showed us that he can unlock the value in this offense. So the Rams passing game is underrated for fantasy, even though they finished really strong.
Bengals receivers, we like them. And what's interesting slash funny is the show we did on Tuesday. On a Tuesday, we had a commenter on YouTube, and we tried to get to our comments. So thank you for doing that. That was like, why don't you guys talk about Andre Iosivas? Guess what we're talking about right now, Bloom? Because we like Bengals receivers too, and Andre Iosivas making training camp buzz.
We like Bengals receivers because of Joe Burrow, and we like Bengals receivers because this is basically a 3 wide receiver offense. And that's why when Jermaine Burton was drafted by the Bengals, we were excited. He was late first, early second round in terms of NFL draft talent. Didn't always get along with his coaches, Georgia and Alabama, but it seemed like he could at least play some sort of role. But enter Andre Iosivas, 6th round pick last year, had the size, speed, athleticism that the NFL loves in a wide receiver. Went to Princeton. Princeton sees Princeton NFL players, Princeton NFL draft prospects. Not exactly a long list. So I think he was considered a raw player, a player that they would develop, but already by the end of last year, he was getting on the field and making a few impact plays. Now we hear, again, consistently from players, from coaches, from beat writers, that he has, in at least one estimation, been the star of camp. And he is the number 3 wide receiver right now. And the other thing for dynasty leagues that you have to consider with T. Higgins, certainly his last year with the Bengals. I don't think they're going to tag him again. I don't think they're going to trade him during the season, during the Super Bowl window. They want to get that Super Bowl ring. Yoshivas could easily take over as the outside receiver opposite Jamar Chase long term. So at least in best ball leagues or deeper leagues where you're taking that third Bengals receiver, it should be a Yoshivas and not Jermaine Burton. Not that Jermaine Burton couldn't make an impact this year if injuries force him into the lineup, but we're watching Bengals training camp, backfield and wide receiver, some names emerging and not going away.
not going away, and that's why you've got to keep track of those drum beats. There's a drum beat in Arizona that we have to get to, and it's about Greg Dortch.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, I do love Michael Wilson. And then you look, all right, Trey McBride's there. So how much that going to complicate things? And then, of course, Marvin Harrison Jr.
Right.
So we got to talk about Arizona because Dortch buzz is strong. In fact, today on our
Mhm.
Football Guys newswire, it says he could push for the starting job opposite of
Yeah.
Harrison, of course. And it's like, okay, I love Wilson, but it seems like Dortch
Mhm.
is pushing him.
Dortch is one of those players, Cease, every time he gets an opportunity, he produces.
Yep.
So why isn't he getting more opportunities? Well, it appears this new regime, Jonathan Gannon regime in Arizona, is willing to give him those opportunities. And what for fantasy becomes a bit difficult, because let's face it, we're asking Kyler Murray to support an early mid second round fantasy wide receiver and a fourth round fantasy elite in current terms, fantasy tight end, asking him to support another option consistently in the passing game. Well, if he can do that, wow, I hope you have Kyler Murray in all your leagues. But what is a problem, which is to say, okay, who's that third option? Greg Dortch is the guy that he's proven he can do it, and he has chemistry with Kyler Murray. Michael Wilson is maybe a player that they hope or plan on him being that guy with his tremendous fundamentals, a refined receiver for someone only going to a second year, but also enter Zay Jones. Zay Jones, look, watch Zay Jones with the Jags. He didn't look like somebody who's washed up. He didn't look like somebody who doesn't deserve opportunities in the league anymore. He might be, if he was on the Patriots roster, he might be their best wide receiver. So was Zay Jones. So what it tells me is when they're rolling out three wide sets, they're going to have a much more imposing group of players, players with better chemistry, players that fit in this offense than what they've had in the past. But if there is one guy that you want to put your chip on late in best ball leagues, or you want to look and see if he's on your dynasty waiver wire, or even in deep leagues, maybe you're going to take him and see how the league starts. I think it is Dortch Seats because, again, he's the guy that has proven in this offense with this quarterback, he can produce.
He can produce, and that's what we're here for. And speaking of Jonathan Gannon, I remember at the
Mm.
coaches' breakfast sitting there and was enthralled with every word that he had to say. And there was only a few of us sitting at the
Uh-huh.
table. It was like Darren Urban, whatever. So I was like, huh, no,
Yeah.
no, Gannon's too interesting for like, there's just like three of us. Uh, Mike Tomlin, there was like five deep around his
Right.
table. But I remember asking him about the wide receivers, trying to figure out which one he liked because it wouldn't have surprised me if Roma Dunze would have been their guy. Wouldn't have
Mhm.
surprised me. Everyone said Marvin Harrison Jr. I mocked Marvin Harrison Jr. to him, and Gannon didn't give me an answer. We talked about it on this show back in April or
Mhm.
March or whenever the owners' meetings were. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is because the Washington receivers and Michael Penix is incredibly talented as a passer. It wasn't just the group of four receivers, basically, but it was guys like Adunze, and then quickly behind him, when I would watch film, I would see Jaylen McMillan and I would get happy because that guy can make plays. And guess what they're learning down in Tampa? That guy can make
Mhm.
plays. So it's same as it ever was as we go talking heads this morning.
Mhm.
Sure, it's Mike Evans and it's Chris Godwin, but there's a new kid that they might want to work into the mix. And remember, as we've said on this show, only two quarterbacks could beat cover four last year regularly. It's Jared Goff and it was Baker Mayfield. Guess what the buzz is about Baker's new toy in Jaylen McMillan?
Sees only once in a lifetime does a player like Jaylen McMillan go off the board as the third wide receiver drafted from his own college team. Wow.
Right. Right.
Because he's ready. He's ready. And a lot of pre-draft Thor Nystrom comes to mind. Folks were saying, "Hey, Jalen McMillan was hurt last year, so yeah, Jalen Polk outshined him." And Jalen Polk, we could talk about him on a show if we wanted to, as a player building momentum. Patriots need him to do some things. He's doing some things in camp, but Jalen McMillan is stealing the show in camp and stealing the headlines as a player who can play all three positions, all three wide receiver positions. And he's a player who is ready already. He showed up basically ready. So again, late round best ball leagues, late round deep leagues, dynasty rookie drafts. If you haven't had your rookie draft yet, this is a player who has clearly been underrated. I think the injury discount applies. But for dynasty leagues, what's really exciting here, Chris Godwin is going to be a free agent next year. And I don't think the Bucks are going to pay him. I don't think they're going to need to pay him because they drafted Jaylen McMillan this year, who can do the things that Godwin can do. And one of the pieces from Pewter Report, if we're talking about team sites before there was ever any of SB Nation and all these other places, Pewter Report was doing it. They're some of the OGs, and they're still doing it, and they're still doing it better than anybody else. Team-specific websites. Liam Cohen, there was a breakdown of Liam Cohen's offense. And what did we keep hearing whenever they were breaking it down? The Cooper Kupp role, this is a Cooper Kupp show, Cease. The Cooper Kupp role on this play, because remember, Liam Cohen was under Sean McVay as offensive coordinator with Baker Mayfield 2 years ago when Mayfield revived his career. The Cooper Kupp role is being played by Chris Godwin. Now, imagine if next year the Cooper Kupp role is being played by Jaylen McMillan. Yeah, you can get I think overpaying for Jaylen McMillan right now could look like a great value in a year in dynasty leagues.
Yeah, and all it needs is an injury. We want everyone to stay healthy forever and ever and ever. But
Right.
did Baker call him a stud? Is that right? Baker's like, that guy's a stud.
He called him a
So
baby maker.
the quarterback is noticing, the quarterback is excited, and the quarterback's ready to continue to prove everybody wrong. So that's why you need to know what's been going on. And that's been a consistent drumbeat. So we're hearing a
Yeah.
crescendo now in the preseason here. We're leading up to the preseason anyway with the Hall of Fame game tonight. So that's a good thing. And a good thing also, I mean, the Jets need some good news. Anytime I get
Mhm.
Jets updates, it's like Aaron Rodgers is yelling at Garrett Wilson. Okay. Well, they'll lean on the ground game and Braylon Allen, the big man from Wisconsin. Now, he's a large back. I get the
Mhm.
distinct pleasure when I can actually conjure myself out of bed, Bloom. I get the distinct
Yeah.
pleasure of watching Audric Estime every day. That's a power player. That's a
Mhm.
big power running back. With Braylon Allen, he's not. He's not a power guy. It wasn't there on film. Maybe it changes in the pros. I don't know. But he's a huge back who's, and I use this word delicately because it sounds like it's not a compliment, although it is. He's kind of dainty. You know,
Mhm.
he's a big body, but he's got good feet. He doesn't necessarily run with power, but he has build up speed. He has build up power. He does. And he can be a handful when he gets up to full speed. And Braylon Allen doing his thing in Jets camp.
And what that thing is establishing himself as the clear number 2 running back in this offense already as a rookie, as a 4th round rookie. And other competition, I mean, Michael Carter's, speaking of Arizona, that's where he is right now. Izzy Abanikanda seems like he's really on the way out. And this was a team also, they drafted another size speed guy in Isaiah Davis in the draft, South Dakota State, small school player. So Allen has really distinguished himself. And you should say, with the intro that you gave him, Cease, he should. A big back who has very impressive athletic gifts should shine. But this drumbeat continues to be significant, loud enough. You're hearing about the excitement, maybe that he can be used not just as an emergency break glass for Brees Hall, but we have seen Brees Hall go down. And we do know that we're interested in every backup running back. We're especially interested whenever it's a clear backup and there's not competition. We're especially interested when it's a rookie and we don't know how good he can be. So Braylon Allen is creating a lot of excitement in Jets training camp, and he should be creating more excitement late in fantasy drafts.
Yeah, and we got to talk about, because anytime Zach Robinson talks, I'm interested. But Tyler Algier carving himself out a role. And I believe Zach said it was like a larger role and or a specific role,
Mhm.
perhaps. And that leads me to think closer. Like,
Right.
is Tyler Algier the closer for the Falcons? So there's a maybe not a surprising report there, but it's like, okay, when your OC is saying that, when the guy's already proven as a talent in the league, and we know Bijan Robinson's going to be the Christian McCaffrey, but is Algier going to do more than people thought?
I think going back to what you're saying, Cease, tell me how many wins the Falcons are going to have. If they have 11 wins, Algier could get a lot of opportunities to close out games.
Sure.
And he's proven that he belongs. He's proven that he's not just a mere backup running back, but he is a good between the tackles, stubborn, powerful running back. So sure, there's going to be a role there. And I think that he's, again, being underrated as not just a clear backup, but maybe a backup plus, somewhere in between backup and committee back, who would get some high value touches potentially at the goal line and late in games against defenses that are basically tapping out. Also, there's the Bijan Robinson upside, if in case of an injury there, the Bijan Robinson injury upside. But probably, I think the biggest takeaway from this season is, Bijan Robinson versus Breece Hall. That's a tough debate because they're both ascendant. They're both in offenses that should be greatly improved. They're both 3-down running backs. They're both running backs we haven't seen the best of yet. But as much as we just talked up Braylon Allen's not going to have the same kind of role as Tyler Algier. And that's why it seems like Breece Hall over Bijan Robinson is probably the call here, in part because of Algier. But if Bijan Robinson goes down, Tyler Algier could be a league winner. I think that Tyler Algier, as the starting running back in this offense, we would probably take in the 3rd round of fantasy drafts. And that's not being factored into his value.
Yeah, it's a different show, Bloom, so perhaps I should save this comment for another time, but I'm scared of any Jets player, even Breece Hall,
That's
because the
fair. That's
quarterback
fair.
situation is a
That's
disaster.
fair.
And in Atlanta, if Cousins goes down, Penix can sling it, man. Penix might be the best quarterback of this class. That's not even a bold statement. So it's I feel better about Atlanta's structure than I do about Robert Saleh on his last leg. Aaron Rodgers hates everybody. I don't know. And I hope I'm wrong because I love Chase Stewart. So we'll see, man. We'll see.
Yeah, and I think you're right that it just has to go with when you're thinking about taking Garrett Wilson in the 1st round too. There's just that little bit of pause because in some ways you're tying your team fate to Aaron Rodgers. But Breece Hall showed late last year that even without Aaron Rodgers, especially in PPR leagues, he was a force.
Good to go. We are, as I go Yoda on today's show. He's Sigmund Bloom. You follow him on Twitter X at Sigmund Bloom. The show is at The Audible. I'm at Cecil Lammey. You want to support the show, footballguys.com. Go there. You can get our free daily newsletter, and that's a great way to introduce yourself to footballguys.com. If you like what you see, and hopefully you do, then please subscribe to footballguys.com. That is the number one way to support this show. We provide you a lot of free content via our YouTube channels, plural, and we ask in return, hey, just subscribe to Football Guys. You'd be super, super happy that you did. He's Sigmund. I'm Cecil. We are The Audible. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned, and would you please stay frosty.